Hello and welcome to the Career Success Podcast. I'm Jason Connolly. If you're a regular listener, it's great to have you back. But if you're new, welcome to the show. In this series every week, we speak to the biggest names in business all across the globe. We talk about their career stories, the lessons learned, how they overcome challenges, and what success habits they practice. Practical advice to help you in your career. If you have a passion for business, then this is the podcast for you. In this episode, I'm joined by Clint Pulver from Utah in the US. Clint is a professional keynote speaker, author, musician, pilot, and workforce expert. Clint is the author of I Love It Here, How Great Leaders Create Organizations Their People Never Want to Leave. That's due out paperback on the 13th of April, 21. Clint is known as the leading authority on employee retention. He has transformed how corporations like Keller Williams, AT&T, and Hewlett Packard create lasting loyalty through his work and research as the Undercover Millennial. He's been featured by Business Q magazine as the top 40 under 40, and as a professional drummer, he has appeared in feature films and also on America's Got Talent. In 2020, Clint won an Emmy Award for his short film Be a Mr. Jensen, which tells a story of how a single moment in time and one particular mentor can change the course of a life. Clint, thanks so much for joining me on this episode.
It's an honor to be here, Jason. Thank you for having me.
You do so many things: a keynote speaker, an author, a musician, a pilot, a workforce expert. But tell us about how this all kind of came about. Tell us about your career story.
Yeah, growing up, I was the kid that always struggled to sit still. I had a hard time focusing. I would just tap all the time. My right hand would move, my left hand would move. And obviously, that's annoying to everybody else in the room. And everybody saw that limitation as a problem. It was an annoyance. And I had one teacher, and his name was Mr. Jensen. And he told me to stay after class one day. And he said, "We're going to talk, we're going to have a conversation." And I'm thinking, as a 10-year-old, I'm getting kicked out of school for sure because I just couldn't sit still. And he pulled me to the back of the room and he said, "Listen, everybody kind of deems you as the problem kid. Like you tap in my class and you tap in everybody else's class, and you can't sit still. And you're the kid that's on the list." And he said, "But I've watched you though. It's crazy. You'll sit there and you'll do an assignment and you'll write with your right hand, and then you'll tap with your left hand. And then you'll switch the pen. And you can write with your left hand and then tap with your right hand." And he said, "I think you're ambidextrous." And I was like, "No, I'm
Oh,
Presbyterian." He said, "No." He said, "No, that's not what it means." He said, "I think you have independence over your limbs." He said, "Can you tap your head and rub your belly at the same time?" And I gave it a go and I could do it. And he said, "Now switch it." He said, "Can you rub your head and then tap your belly?" And back and forth, Jason, without thinking about it, I could do it. And he leaned
wow.
forward and he smiled and he said, "Clint, I don't think you're a problem. I just think you're a drummer." And some people hear that and they
How
go, "Well,
old was you, Clint, when
what?"
this revelation manifested itself?
Right? Yeah, I was 10 years old. I was 10 years old,
Wow.
and he looked at me and said, "You're not a problem. You're a drummer." And I believe in moments, Jason. I think that in our lives, we don't remember days, we remember moments. And in this moment, Mr. Jensen, the old teacher, he leaned back in his desk and he opened up the top drawer and he reached inside and he took out my very first pair of drumsticks. My very first
Oh.
pair. And he put them in my hands and he said, "Clint, listen, I know everybody else sees this annoyance. They see this problem, but I want you to know I see an opportunity. I really do. And I just want you to keep these sticks in your hands as much as you can." And that was 22 years ago. And I can sit here today and on this show tell you honestly, 22 years ago, literally to this exact moment, I've tried my best to keep my promise to Mr. Jensen. And for 20 years, 22 years, I've had the opportunity to tour and record all over the world as a professional drummer. I've been on America's Got Talent. I played with incredible artists like Tim McGraw and Carrie Underwood and the Blue Man Group. And
Oh.
I graduated college with zero debt. I graduated university with no debt at all. And that was because I had music scholarships.
And what a beautiful thing for a teacher to connect you with something like that and to see these traits which were manifesting themselves. To kind of think that, that's what you're going to be great at. But he's obviously made a huge impact on your life because you won an Emmy Award for a short film, Be a Mr. Jensen.
Yes. Yeah, you can go on YouTube and just type in "Be a Mr. Jensen," and you can watch that short film, and it's the
Mm,
reenactment of that moment, that life-changing
wow.
moment where somebody decided to see what was right with a young kid instead of seeing what was wrong.
Have you kind of spoken to him throughout the years about
Oh, yeah,
well,
absolutely.
I'm guessing he must know if he's got a short film made about him that's one of
Yeah,
many.
yeah, he's still a massive part of my life, a massive part of my life. I call him Larry now. Mr.
Mhm.
Jensen's become Larry, and he is a huge instrumental person still to this day. And, I asked him 3 years ago, I said, "Why me?" I said, "Mr. Jensen, you've taught thousands of kids. Why me? Why was I the kid that got the drumsticks?" And one of the things he said is he learned early on in education that he couldn't save every kid in the classroom, but he could save
Mm.
one. And every term, every semester, he chose just one kid, and it was usually the kid that was the problem, usually the kid that struggled, or everybody saw this child as a problem. And he chose that one kid. And every day he woke up as an educator, he wiggled his toes, he knew he was alive, and he went to work for one kid. And I was
Mm.
that one. And I'm so grateful, right? I'm so thankful that a caring adult took the time to advocate, took the time to see possibility instead of limitation. And I mean, it changed my life, Jason. Changed my life.
I'm guessing kind of tell us more about how the kind of stories unfolded for you because obviously music has kind of been, a pivotal pillar in absolutely everything that you've done. And I think it's such a beautiful story about your kind of childhood. But kind of walk us through how it's kind of gone on from there because this is only one part, Clint, of your kind of repertoire of what you do. But it sounds very much to me like that's kind of been the pillar that's kind of even just paved the way for you to go on to do all these other things.
Yeah, I growing up, I wanted to be a helicopter pilot. I wanted to fly. No, being a drummer was not like the chosen career path that I grew up saying I wanted to become. And then
Mm,
I was diagnosed with an eye disease at 21, and I was told that I was going blind. And I was losing my eyesight every year. My sight would get worse and worse. I was diagnosed with a disease called keratoconus, and by the age of 31 or 32, I would be completely blind. And so I went through that challenge of trying to now figure out what to do with the rest of my life. And I ended up going to university. I graduated. Everybody told me I needed to pursue, the money. I needed to get the benefits, the stability, get a good stable job and a career that's going to have longevity. And nobody
mm,
really like emphasized the importance of passion or doing something you loved or purpose in your job. It was all just about stability. And there was a mentor in my life and he in college and he shared with me a quote by Oscar Wilde, the British playwright. And his quote was simply this: "To live is the rarest thing in the world. For most people merely exist, and that is all." And that quote haunted me every day after I graduated university because I was just existing. Every day I would do the same thing day in and day out. Like there was no sense of a thrill, there was no excitement, there was no living taking place. And to live, like really live, that's a rare thing. Gallup just posted out a new study 2 years ago where it showed that 86% of working adults hate what they do for a job. Like they're just miserable. It's not fulfilling. It's just a job. Be glad you have a job, you've got the benefits. Put your head down, go to work. You're working for the weekends, you're working for the benefits. Congratulations, but you're not happy about it.
mm.
And I was in that position out of college, and I sat down with 2 of my friends, and I said, "Wouldn't it be crazy if you could find one job that allowed you to do 3 things?" And I proposed what I call the 3 Ps, and it was passion, the ability to provide, and number 3 was a sense of purpose. So passion,
Mm.
provide, and purpose. What if you could find a job, Jason, that allowed you to do what pulled on your heartstrings? Like something that, my goodness, almost if you had 3 hours on a Saturday with nothing to do. Like, could you find a job that would allow you to do what you would choose to do on that Saturday? Something that just excited you, something that felt thrilling, that was fun. And then second,
I
go ahead.
totally agree with you.
Right? I mean, wouldn't that be, wonderful? And then the second thing is providing, because if you wanna live as a responsible human being, like,
Mm.
there's a word called a mortgage, right? And rent, and utilities,
Oh,
and
yes.
and medical expenses, and insurance, and taxes, and life can be expensive. So, for some people, they need $400,000 a year to live. Some people need $40,000 a year to live. It's all there's no right answer, it's just it depends. But what if the job could provide in a way that's sufficient for you? And then number 3 was purpose. What if you could do something bigger than yourself? where you felt like on your job you were contributing to the world, not
Mm.
just your own ego, not just your own bank account, but you were doing something that was significant, not just successful. And I proposed this to my two buddies, and they looked at me and they said, dude, it doesn't exist. They're like, I just don't think you can find one job that allows you to do all three. They're like, look at a teacher. A teacher's doing what they love. It's full of passion and purpose, but every summer they're looking for another job because they can't pay their bills. Or look at a doctor, medical
Mm.
doctor,
Mm.
making good money, but they're stressed out of their mind. They're burnt out. They never see their family. The malpractice lawsuits, it's the stress. I don't think they're living that either. And then my friend just said, "What you're asking for is so rare," and that triggered that quote by Oscar Wilde.
It's really interesting what you're saying, but do you think that the world's becoming more, people are starting to wake up to this a little bit more these days? Or because, everyone wants to feel fulfilled, but, I guess a lot of people just think, well, that's where I am in life, and,
Mhm.
this is the hand I've been dealt, and I can't leave, I'm stuck in this job. What is it that I'm asking you many questions now, all within the one question? I'm
Yeah.
aware of. But what is it that makes that sort of individual that, has that get up to go out and go, no, I'm not happy with this. I want to make these changes, compared to these other people, because everyone wants a fulfilled life. And, you spend a third of your life working.
Absolutely. And that's where I was at in this story. And 2 weeks after this conversation, Jason, I quit my job. I burnt all the ships. I left everything. I was in a successful career, making great money, had stability, had the benefits, and I left it. I burnt the ships and I jumped into another career that allowed me to do those 3 things. And so I think if someone's listening to this and they're like, "Well, nice story, Clint, but I've got 3 kids and a wife, and I've got to put food on the table, and I can't just go gallivanting off on my dreams and hope for the best." And I agree with that. But there are things that you can do to de risk a situation. I think most people live by default rather than living by design. They
Mm.
let life
Tell
happen
us
to
more
them.
about that.
Yeah, right? Like it's letting life happen to you. You graduate, you get this degree, you find the job, it works, but you're not fulfilled. So be willing to change it. Design a
Mm.
life. Is there somebody in your world that's living and breathing the life that you wish you had? If you could start over, what would you do? If money were no issue, what would you do? Take a minute and dream. Like literally just dream. That's where it starts. And I think sometimes we let the realities of life beat out the inner child. They beat out the
Mm.
hopefulness. They beat out the possibilities because it's not rational or it's not real. But I think it starts with dreaming. It starts with thinking, okay, what would fulfill me? If I could start over, if tomorrow
Mm.
I could be in a new chapter, what would that look like? You've got to first figure out what the goal is, right? If you're facing in the right direction, all you have to do is keep walking. But most people have no clue on what that direction is.
How would one person go about finding that out? You was obviously very blessed. It sounds like you've come across some great people that have really helped you in your life find that kind of direction and so on. But how would someone find that if they're just thinking, well, I just don't know what it is? How do you even start that process?
That's a hard question because it depends for every person. Every person's gonna
Yeah.
have different talents, gifts, strengths, ideas, personalities, loves, passions, desires, fears, strengths, and so you have to get acquainted with yourself. That's why again, like, okay, if you had 3 hours on a Saturday, what would you be doing? Some people that's playing Xbox. Some people they love to hike and be out in nature. Some people they love to go ride horses or they would love to just sit on their phone and scroll YouTube. Like, what does that look like for you? Who do you follow on social media? And why do you follow them? Are you someone who loves to watch sports and you follow athletes or you follow specific teams? Or are you someone that loves finance and business and you're following business accounts? Like, what do you like to do? That's the first question. Like, what is it that pulls on your heartstrings? Figuring out what's passion to you. What fulfills you? What excites you? Start there. And then second, once you figure out what that is, my dad was my wrestling coach growing up. I grew up wrestling in America, and every Friday night my dad would take me to the varsity wrestling matches to watch the really good wrestlers. And I remember Friday night, that was like date night. That was go hang out with the family, or excuse me, go hang out with friends and go on dates. And that was
Mm.
Friday night. It's a big deal for a high school student. And every Friday, my dad would drag me to the wrestling matches. And I remember I looked at him, I said, "Dad, I don't want to go." And he got really serious with me and he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Listen," he said, "kid, do you want to be a great wrestler?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And then he said, "Then you've got to hang out by the mat. If you want to get good at wrestling,
Mm.
then hang out by the mat. If you want to get good at basketball, then hang out by the hoop." If you want to do something different and you figured out what that might look like, you should do whatever it takes to associate with astonishing people. People that are living and
That's
breathing the life you want to live. Go hang out by the mat. So if you find you figure out, oh, I want to be a YouTube influencer, or I want to start an Amazon account and start selling things online, or I'd love to go into the medical profession. Where do those people hang out? What associations, clubs, organizations, what Facebook groups? Where do they hang out with? We find purpose through the association and connection with other purposeful people. And when we're willing to do what it takes to associate with those people, we then find that design. We find the roadmap. You figure out how they did it, what they're doing to be successful. And in doing so, that will breed success. That will allow you to become more.
I think you make some really valid points there, and I think what your father said to you is exactly true. If you want to be that thing, you need to get to that place, and you need to be in the right place at the right time and associate yourself with the right people. So I absolutely agree with that. But it sounds like, even in your early years, it's been challenging for you to even sort of be diagnosed, with the eye condition that you had, but to still kind of have that drive to get up and go, despite that, I'm going to keep going. And it sounds like, you've had a good few challenges throughout the years to kind of overcome as well, Clint.
Yeah, it has not been easy. I mean, I have literally failed my way to success. I believe that. And I look back on
But
my life.
isn't that why you're successful? The way you keep bouncing back and coming back again and, being on that journey, that's probably testament to you on why you're a success.
Well, and I've learned too that sometimes good things fall apart so that better things can fit together. You know, I
Now
mean,
that's an interesting concept.
this whole year, I mean, I'm a professional speaker, and I traveled the world speaking at live events with thousands of people, hundreds of people at a conference or a convention. And March 6, 2020, COVID-19 impacted the world and shut my business down. In a matter of 2 weeks, Jason, we went from record growth to 47 cancellations and postponements for live events for conferences that had booked me to speak.
Mm.
And
Well,
literally something out of my control just disappeared out of, I mean, literally in 2 weeks, it was gone.
yeah,
And there's
and
this
that must
movie,
have been
it's called
tough.
Shawshank Redemption. I don't know if you've seen that film, but it's a
I
great
have, I
film.
like it.
Yeah, it's a good film. There's a really powerful moment in that film where he looks at the other guy and he says, "You can get busy living or you can get busy dying." And that's kind of been a general theme that when life happens, when crap hits the fan, when things fall apart, you can get busy living or you can get busy dying. And sometimes good things fall apart so that better things can fit together. But I also believe that God can't steer a parked car. Or in short, when we move, when you choose to take action, even though you don't know necessarily what the future holds, that creates optimism, that creates hope, that creates possibility. And so we started to
Mm.
build a virtual studio. And we had some clients that we proposed and said, "Hey, I can't be there in person, but I can do this virtually. And it will still be great quality and it'll be unique and it'll be different." And my goodness, we've done over 154 virtual presentations during COVID-19. And we thrived. We thrived in a time where our industry disappeared. And it was because we got busy living, not busy dying.
I think that's a really interesting kind of analogy that you use there because I believe it as well. But if you are standing still in life, you are not, going in any direction. But I think what I'm kind of taking from what you're saying, Clint, is, to keep moving means, yes, okay, you might sometimes reach these cross junctures, which are really difficult and hard. And yes, you're going to trip up sometimes. And I've had these moments throughout my career. I've had so many knockbacks. Some of them, I'd never thought I'd stand again. But then I stood again, started walking, and then that turned into a run. And then, you learn from these things. I think that, personally, I'm sure you agree with the sentiment of what I'm about to say. But I think that if you are someone that can bounce back again and learn from mistakes, then a mistake isn't a mistake, it's a learning experience, even though it can seem absolutely awful at the time when you're going through these things. And it
Yeah.
seems to me, even when, COVID arrived for you, it's, to a lot of people, that would have been, oh, okay, I've got nothing to do. My events have been cancelled. But to you, you saw an opportunity in that kind of moment to go out there and, if anything, it sounds like you've probably been going to physical events is one thing, but with the internet does come opportunity.
Absolutely, and we'll come out of this because eventually, and we are coming out of this. The world's coming back, and we'll get through this. And I just learned that in the end, we're going to be okay. And if I'm not okay right now, then it's not the end. And I still hold the pen to write the story. Can't lose faith in the end of the story. And you brought up a really cool point, Jason, where you said eventually it's always gotten better. It's true. I look back at some of the rainiest days in my life, the hardest times, the darkest days, and eventually the sun rose. Eventually I smiled again. Eventually it got better. And so I think we have to remember that. We still hold the pen, write a great story, and know that eventually it always gets better.
And talking about holding a pen, Clint, I think this leads nicely on to your book. I love it here how great leaders create organizations that people never want to leave. Now, this is due out in literally just over a couple of weeks. Tell us about the book. How did this all kind of come about? To write a book in itself is a massive achievement. So tell us more about this.
Yeah, I will never do it again. It has been one of the hardest
The
things
pen is
that
put down. You say the pen's put down for now, Clint. It's probably being
Yes,
read
yes,
out again.
I put the pen down for time. Yeah, it's been difficult. Writing a book is very hard, it's very challenging. This book also took 4 years of research. The book is based off of my work as the Undercover Millennial. It's kind of like Undercover Boss, if anybody's seen that TV show. It's like
Oh, I
that,
love that show.
and I would go undercover into an organization as a millennial, someone who was looking for a job.
Hmm.
So I'd walk into a finance department or a retail store or a fast food restaurant, and I would go up to the first person that I saw and I would just say, "Hey, what's it like to work here? I'm just thinking about applying." And they always kind of look around, it gets quiet. We feel like we're doing an illegal drug exchange. And then they tell me everything, everything. The
But
good, the
how often does someone get asked that, Clint? That's just not, if someone walks in, it's very rare. I can imagine it was when you ask these questions to people, it's probably the first time they've ever been asked this. So yeah, I can
bad.
imagine there's an element of
Yeah,
surprise when you
yeah,
ask
and
these.
opening up Pandora's box, right? Because and again,
Yeah.
we honesty. We created, Jason, an environment where honesty could exist. We created an
Mm,
environment where people could speak their truth because I wasn't a survey. I wasn't a one-on-one management meeting. I was just
yeah.
another millennial. And we have worked with 181 organizations and I have interviewed undercover over 10,000 employees. And
Wow.
we've been doing that for almost 5 years now. And the magic of all of the research is when I would go up to an employee and say, "What's it like to work here?" And they would respond with, "I love it here. I love my job. I love."
10,000 in 5 years, Clint. That is a exercise in itself.
Yeah, again, going back to why I'll never do it again.
Um,
It has been so much work, but we've created a breadth of research and a perspective that is unlike anything else that has ever been done. This is not another leadership book written by a self-proclaimed leadership expert. This is a book written by 10,000 employees who knew when their leaders were getting it right.
Was there
And
kind of common themes that you, when doing this, that you kind of kept cropping up and you kept thinking, oh, it's this one again? This is one of the things I keep hearing. Or was it, was you quite surprised by the breadth of what, people would tell you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we heard everything from illegal drug deals that were going on within companies
Oh,
to
wow.
scandals to, but I and that's the thing. I didn't want the book to be, a book talking about problems. I wanted the book to be written about solutions. And that's why we
Mm,
titled the book I Love It Here. How great leaders create organizations their people never want to leave. I wanted to write a book that was solution based, that was prescriptive. It was an actionable narrative where people reading it would go, that's what I need to do. That's what creates lasting change. That's what creates better engagement and retention. And we
mm,
took the stories of great leaders when I would go up to their employees and they would say, I love it here. I love my job. I won't leave. I love where I work. Well, why? Why? What keeps you here? And one of the great themes that we talk about in the book is the power of mentorship, not management. When an employee hated their
mm.
job, Jason, they talked about the manager. But when an employee loved their job, they talked about the mentor.
I agree with that. I always say to people in my company, I don't like the word manager. People don't like to be managed. They want to be led. And even when I saw your kind of a chapter summary, I saw the mentor manager, and it instantly, it struck a chord with kind of my own experiences and beliefs. The people that felt they were being mentored rather than managed, was it kind of absolutely glaringly obvious to you kind of difference in behavior and mindset that these people were displaying?
Absolutely, because they felt advocated for, not just
Mm.
developed. They felt like they not only were seen, but they also had a future. And they had an advocate within the company that was there to help them grow, that was there to help them succeed, that was there to make sure that they were seen. Every person wants to be seen, heard, and understood. And your people in your business, if they can't grow where they're at, they will go and grow somewhere else. We're in a really
Mm.
interesting time right now, Jason, where during 2020, retention rates in companies are at an all-time high. Everybody was nervous. Everybody's hunkered down. Everybody was grateful if they had a job, and retention rates are great. But now that we're
Uh,
coming out of this recession,
mm.
we're coming out of this pandemic, two things are going to happen. And we've done research during COVID-19. We worked with 47 different organizations during this time, and I'm calling it right now. In quarter three and quarter four, we are going to see a mass exodus of people leaving their jobs for something else for two reasons. Number one, they remember how they were treated during COVID-19. I saw some pretty horrific things, Jason, that leaders did to their people during COVID-19. I also saw some incredibly significant, empowering, and beautiful things that leaders did during COVID-19. So that's number one. They remember, and they will remember how you treated them during the pandemic. Number two, it's given everybody time to think. Like it's just shut down the whole world, and we find ourselves in our career going, okay, is this really where I want to be? Oh my gosh, I mean, this really disrupted everything. It knocked me out of the routine. Does my job today look the same as it did in 2019? People are realizing I can work. I can work in the UK and have a job in New York. I can live in California and work in Germany. The remote virtual landscape of what's changed in our jobs and in our economy it's just transformed so much. And a lot of people's jobs don't look the same. And now they're working at home, and for some people that's wonderful. For some people that's hell on earth. And there's going to be a lot of disruption. And so now more than ever, we need good leaders to connect with their people. Because if you don't,
Mm.
they'll go and connect somewhere else.
And I totally agree with you. Working in the recruitment industry, I've been saying this to my team for a while. It there's going to be a lot of movement in the market, and it's going to happen very quickly. All you need is for the market to kind of open back up again, and that is going to happen. And as soon as that happens, there's going to be a lot of movement because well, even here in the UK, a lot of people didn't move because of Brexit, the hung parliament. Then they haven't moved because of COVID, and there's going to be so much movement in the market. And I think your
Yep,
prediction of quarter three, quarter four is exactly in line with my prediction. So it will be really interesting, Clint, to see how this kind of unfolds and manifests over the course of the rest of this year.
agreed. Agreed. Yeah, I think we're in for a big wake up call.
I do too. And I was going to ask you for one particular bit of advice or listen for people, but I think you've covered so much throughout this episode, Clint. And I think you've made so many really valid points to people who, might be in a job that they're not satisfied in, or perhaps even to people running businesses. So I think it's been really insightful. If people want to find out more about you, Clint, or indeed they want to get their hands on a copy of I Love It Here, where can they go to?
Yeah, they can go on Amazon. Amazon's the greatest place for it. It's available for pre-order right now if you just type in "I love it here." Yeah, and that book releases globally April 13th, 2021.
Well, I wish you the very best of luck with that. It sounds like an absolutely fascinating read, and it sounds like it's been, a right journey for you to kind of go through this. But I thank you, Clint, for coming on the show. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure so many people will find gold throughout this episode, which is going to help them in either one or several aspects of their career or their life.
I appreciate you, Jason. Thanks for having me on the show. Thanks for what you do, and it's truly been a pleasure.
That was Clint Pulver from Utah in the US. I'm Jason Connolly. This is the Career Success Podcast. Until next time, goodbye.